Hi, this is John Linneball of John Linneball Tutoring, and this is AP US History Video 15, Religious Pluralism in Colonial North America. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share it, and subscribe. You can also leave a comment, that's always wonderful. And you can see my website at www.johnlinneballtutoring.com. And if you don't like ads, why not try testpreparation.locals.com. That's where I put a lot of these things, and there will eventually be some bonus content on there that won't be on my YouTube channel. So let's move on. Religious pluralism in colonial America. A number of different religious and spiritual movements thrived in colonial North America. Many of these came from Europe, and religious differences brought members of these movements to America. You might remember that religious persecution brought the Pilgrims to America from Great Britain, right? With a little stop off in the Netherlands on the way. But anyway, some of these religions came from Great Britain, some came from Germanic states, some came from Ireland, some came from France. For example, French Calvinist Protestants, sometimes just called the French Pilgrims, were called Huguenots or Huguenots. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But they settled in country areas in New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, etc. to find places where they could live and not be persecuted. Immigration and minority denominations. In 1600s British America, the vast majority of churches were Anglican, Church of England, or Congregationalist, Puritan. These churches were recognized and funded by colonial governments except for Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, which separated church and state, so they didn't fund any churches. Quakers were very active in Pennsylvania, probably because of the separation of church and state, so they could find a place to settle. However, minority denominations did come to become widely accepted throughout the colonies. Baptist and Methodist churches grew rapidly as a result of the Great Awakening. Some things, such as the Flushing Remonstrance, which we'll discuss momentarily, had a great effect on liberalizing religious tolerance, because many colonies did actually have official churches and or forbade people from worshiping in religions that were not approved by the government. But getting back to this, immigrants brought their own religious practices to the colonies. Germans settled in country areas such as New York, Pennsylvania, and the South, and some of the major sects with Germanic followers were Lutheran, and Calvinist. Some of the smaller sects with Germanic followers were Mennonites, think the Amish, Moravians, and Dunkers. Major cities such as New York City attracted immigrants who practiced other religions, including Sephardic Jews. The Flushing Remonstrance. So you remember seeing when we talked here, we have this postage stamp from 1957 commemorating the Flushing Remonstrance. You might be asking, what the heck is a Flushing Remonstrance? I'm glad you asked. It's not when someone yells at you for not flushing the toilet. Ha ha ha. Anyway, according to Wikipedia, the Flushing Remonstrance was a petition to then Director General Peter Stuyvesant of New Netherland, a Dutch colony that would become New York. 30 settlers of the village of Flushing, which is now a neighborhood in Queens, petitioned Stuyvesant to lift the colony's ban on worship by sects other than the Dutch Reformed Church, at least with regard to Quaker missionaries who'd come there. While Stuyvesant was not initially inclined to enforce the ban, he was under pressure from colonists who wanted the ban enforced. And here's a little comic about the Flushing Remonstrance. So these people wrote to the governor, signed a petition asking them to allow the Quaker missionaries to hold their worship services, etc. And some prominent signers were imprisoned. The Quakers held secret meetings in the woods until John Bone defiantly opened his home to them, but Bone's bold protest was severely punished. John Bone was sent to Holland to stand trial. What they don't tell you in this comic is John Bone was not Dutch. He was English, and he did not speak Dutch. So he did eventually manage to get out there and influence the Dutch government. But that's pretty harsh. You're being sent to a country that you're not from and where you don't speak the language. He refused to pay a fine or to abstain from befriending Quakers. So he wouldn't pay a fine, wouldn't stop hanging around with Quakers. He thought it was unfair. So there was a charter for the town of Flushing, grants the right for liberty of conscience. The law infringes on this right. That is why the Flushing Remonstrance was written. Anyway, in case you're wondering what a remonstrance is, it's a forcefully reproachful protest. So that's at the bottom of the screen here, according to Microsoft Bing's dictionary. So think of when you're being yelled at by your parents or something like that. That's a remonstrance. And the importance of the Flushing Remonstrance is, according to Kenneth T. Jackson, a New York Times writer, you can find the New York Times article link in the description, the Flushing Remonstrance was remarkable for 4 reasons. 1, it articulated a fundamental right, the right to religion, that is as basic to American freedom as any other. That's a big one. We all like the First Amendment. The authors backed up their words with actions by sending it to an official not known for tolerance. That was Stuyvesant. Stuyvesant really did not have a great sense of humor. You may have also heard about the libel suit by Stuyvesant against John Peter Zenger. And that was where a jury said, nah, if it's true, you can say it, even if the government or whoever's suing for libel doesn't like it. But anyway, we're talking about that. And they stood up for others in articulating a principle that was of little discernible benefit to themselves. Discernible means you couldn't make it out. These people themselves were not Quakers. They didn't really need religious freedom for Quakers for themselves because they weren't Quakers. So they stood up for people, and they didn't really have any particular gain to get from it. They just stood up for a principle. And the language of the Remonstrance was as beautiful as the sentiments they expressed. So this was one of the first statements of religious freedom and tolerance in colonial America, and this is probably one of the sources of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which guarantees freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to peaceably assemble, all of which were being violated by Peter Stuyvesant, who of course was not American because there was not a United States of America and wasn't even British. He was the governor for the Dutch colony. So anyway, but it would not be long before the Dutch would turn this over to England, and about the year before it was turned over to England, the Dutch government did order Stuyvesant to allow the Quakers to worship and allow for religious freedom. So here we go. The Great Awakening. With both church attendance and religious beliefs declining in New England, and Enlightenment ideas and Deism, which is discussed here later, on the rise, church leaders needed to take action. By the 1730s, charismatic new preachers had a new exciting style to their religious practices. The movement led by these preachers was called the Great Awakening. So these were very much revival meetings. These were meetings where people wanted to get you excited. The preacher wanted to get you excited and get you moving and get you listening, and it was based on emotion rather than logic. So it wasn't a preacher saying, well, as you can say here, the word sin is used in a very interesting way. That'd be a very intellectual way. The other one is, Jesus wants to keep you from sin, get that devil out of here, you want to get people all excited. So if you've seen churches where people dance and sing and things like that, it's closer to that. Or you've seen a TV evangelist, usually they're very exciting. They're not just people who just sit there and kind of drone on about the Bible. So, the Great Awakening originated in Great Britain. The most famous Great Awakening preacher was George Whitefield, who visited the North American colonies 7 times. While he was there in the North American colonies, Whitefield held many huge revival meetings at various locales, whipping the crowds into an ecstatic religious fervor. Got people excited. Great Awakening continued. Okay, here we see a sign. The birthplace of Jonathan Edwards was the first American theologian and philosopher, born in 1703. Son of Timothy Edwards, he graduated from Yale at age 17. Remember, Yale and Harvard, I believe those were the first schools that they had, as they were founded as divinity schools. They were founded as training places for ministers, etc. So he was a pastor in Bolton, tutor at Yale, missionary at Stockbridge, and in 1758 became president of Princeton University, where he died. His grandson, Aaron Burr, became the 3rd vice president of the United States. So this is from the bicentennial, 1776 to 1976. So anyway, the Great Awakening continued. Other itinerant, that means traveling, preachers gave emotional religious sermons and services to thousands of colonists. These religious meetings focused on the emotional rather than intellectual aspect of religion. So remember, emotional, dancing, screaming, yes, yes to Jesus, things like that, as opposed to the intellectual, well, Jesus is trying to transmit the spiritual principle. You can see the difference. And you can certainly hear it and you can feel it. The Massachusetts preacher Jonathan Edwards gave his sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God, to a captivated audience. You may have had to read this sermon for English class. I know I had to read it in the common anthology English text called Adventures in Reading in 10th or 11th grade. if you've had that series, in the lower grades, it's Adventures for Readers, and it becomes Adventures in Reading. So that's pretty good. And it certainly was one of the things, it was an example of early American writing that existed, so as it was becoming differentiated from British literature or British writing. The main difference between Calvinism and Puritanism and the Great Awakening is that the Great Awakening's brand of Protestant Christianity taught that anyone could be saved through good works and good thoughts, as opposed to Calvinist predestination and the idea of original sin. Calvinism, God already determined, maybe even before you were born, whether you were going to go to heaven or not. And so good works really didn't do much other than that you were meant to work at your calling and help the community. But in the Great Awakening's version of Christianity, no. Good works and good intentions and good deeds and good thoughts were all ways to make sure that you would go on to heaven and not go to hell. So that was much more important. So that was a big difference. Besides the emotionality and everything else, that's a major theological difference. Do you have a hand in whether you're going to hell or not? Deism and the Enlightenment. In the 1700s, many educated colonists abandoned Puritanism and other faiths for a belief system called Deism. The main idea of Deism was that God, or a God, created the world and a system of natural laws, that is, scientific laws, but God wasn't involved in running the daily workings of the universe. The idea of scientific laws running the universe and the desire to understand those laws was consistent with Enlightenment ideas. Deism rejected the ideas of holy books, supernatural occurrences, etc., basically kind of the religious part of most religions, somebody performing a miracle, etc. So you can think of the watchmaker analogy if you've studied the religious aspects or religious debates over evolution. You may have heard of the watchmaker analogy, which I believe a minister in Scotland in the 1700s, I can't remember his name, Paley, something like that. Anyway, basically he said, well, okay, if you see a watch, nobody really thinks that the watch was formed by natural forces. Obviously, it must have been made by a watchmaker. So just as a watch has a watchmaker, the universe has a God. Just as the watchmaker doesn't stand there and run the watch all day, rather, he already created the mechanism so that when you wind the watch or when you put a battery in the watch, it just goes, because that's how the mechanism works. God doesn't stand there and look over our shoulder and run the universe, but he lets the laws of nature that he invented do, or she, whatever God chooses to be. God just set up the mechanism and walked away. Kind of like a crock pot. Set it and forget it. Okay. Anyway, Thomas Paine, pictured in the upper left, the common sense guy, was a deist, as were Benjamin Franklin and probably Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson never came out and said it, but a lot of the things he did and said, etc., indicated he was probably a deist. So the differences between deism and theism: deism says there was a higher power, which could be a god, created the universe. Theism, God, gods that are named, created the universe. The deist higher power does not participate in our universe. Obviously, under practically every religion, the god or gods participate in our universe. The creator may or may not know about humans in deism. In theism, the god or gods care about humans. Deism does not necessarily interact with us. Theism, they actually interact with us. And under the deist, the god does not listen or care about the prayer, so maybe God is listening but doesn't care. Maybe God just isn't there to listen to it. Theist gods listen to prayers. Deism rejects revelation. That's kind of another religious thing where things just pop out. God just decided to tell you this. Theism says, oh yes, that's, there are lots of revelations, and if you read the Bible, there are lots of times, including the writing on the wall, literally, where there was writing on the wall that said someone was going to be doomed and things like that. Deism, God is unknowable. And theism says God is knowable. Deism says God has no known ongoing effect on our universe. Theism says God has a constant effect on our universe. So deism does not subscribe to the claims of religion, holy books, supernatural claims, prophets. Well, if there's a brook that you think is holy, trust me, deism is saying, no, there's no such thing as a holy river, holy brook, holy stream, ha ha ha. But no holy book. And so theism does subscribe to the claims of religion, it accepts supernatural claims. So the religious parts of religion, that someone can turn water into wine, somebody can heal the sick with no particular medical powers, somebody can, revive from the dead, etc., etc. Those would be theist claims that are supernatural. Deism rejected that. I'm not criticizing any religion. I'm not supporting anything. I'm just telling you what these different viewpoints have to say. So if you're going to post an offended comment, go ahead, but just know that I'm not trying to offend anybody. All right. Did you find this video useful? Please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything. You'll be alerted about my new videos. Why do I care? It's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenue unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours. That's 240,000 minutes of view time in a year. While many people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I also don't have 1,000 subscribers at this time. Would you like to see this without ads? Really? Try joining my community at testpreparation.locals.com. If you have trouble joining, please let me know. It's still pretty new, so I might not have all the kinks worked out yet, but let's try it. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I'd appreciate your input. I'm always happy to read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos, and I reserve the right to delete comments from and block those who specialize in destructive criticism, trolls basically, or things that are off topic. Spammers, disturb people, whatever. Anyway, you can also hire me for tutoring. You can hire me to tutor you through Zoom online. If you're in the Bay Area and subject to California restrictions, etc. during this pandemic, you can have me come to your house or you can come to mine. We'll probably have to meet outside, socially distanced, masked, etc. Anyway, you can hire me for tutoring. And if you'd like my contact information, continue, and thanks for watching. Facebook, www.facebook.com/Linnaball Tutoring is my business Facebook page. You can contact me through that. Instagram, it's www.instagram.com/john.linnaball.tutoring. You can contact me through that. My phone number is 415-623-4251. You can text me even through that. It's my cell phone. Email, john@johnlinnaball.com. Website is www.johnlinnaball.com and www.johnlinnaballtutoring.com. Testpreparation.locals.com. Again, that's my locals.com site. And if you want to send good old-fashioned postal mail or a package or something, John Linnaball Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133. And here's a disclaimer, and then we're done. Note, this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on Barron's AP United States History Review book and any other sources listed in the video description and my general knowledge of U.S. history. So it's basically the Barron's book and some Wikipedia articles and whatever else I've listed. While this should help you do well on the AP U.S. History exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and asks you about in his or her own tests, homework, etc. Please, please, please read your class text and pay attention to what your teacher says in class, because that's going to be the guide to passing all the other tests and getting good grades on the homework that your teacher assigns. All right, hope you are having a great day. Talk to you later.